Did you know that over 2/3 of all fighting in relationships is over perpetual problems? That means almost 70% of the time, you and your partner are going to have the same fight over and over and over again. And if you're like so many of the couples that I work with, that's really frustrating, especially if you can't seem to find any solution to these problems. So in today's video, I want to teach you how to stop fighting over perpetual problems and how to start moving towards a resolution. Hi, I'm Valerie, and welcome to my channel. As a licensed therapist and a relationship expert, I've spent over 10 years helping couples repair, restore, and reconnect. So if you're struggling in your relationship, you're in the right place. I want to help you stop fighting and start communicating. If you have not had a chance to subscribe, hit that subscribe button right now. This is where I share my best tips for building a better relationship. Before we get into our video, let's do a quick disclaimer. While I'm a licensed therapist, I'm not your therapist, and this video is for educational purposes only. Bottom line, all relationships are unique, and if you're struggling in your marriage, please reach out to a highly qualified licensed therapist for individual guidance and support. So let's talk about perpetual problems. Perpetual problems are the types of issues that come up over and over and over again in a relationship. Perpetual problems are things like money, chores, time. These are the things that couples seem to fight about over and over and over again. And the problem with perpetual issues is that they never have a resolution. No matter how many times you and your partner argue about money, argue about chores, argue about time, you can never seem to find a solution. If you're like most of the couples that I work with, that probably leaves you feeling pretty frustrated. And if you're fighting all the time, that might leave you feeling really disregarded, unsupported, and even hopeless about the future. The good news is you do not have to get stuck in perpetual problems. The first step in escaping perpetual problems is to figure out what the real problem is. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, I know the real problem. The real problem is my husband didn't do the laundry, or the real problem is my wife is always running late. No, that's not the real problem. That's the situation. And this is where most couples go wrong. Most couples fight about the situation. They fight about the chores. They fight about being late. They fight about money. They fight about the situation over and over and over again, and they never talk about their feelings. And that's the real problem. It's not the situation. The real problem is how the situation makes you feel. And that's what I want you to talk about with your partner. So let me give you an example. Let's say the situation is, my husband hasn't done the laundry, the sink is full of dirty dishes, and I'm really frustrated. The problem is that I feel overwhelmed, stressed out, and unsupported. So when the dishes aren't done and the laundry's piling up, I feel overwhelmed and unsupported by my partner. That's the problem. Let me give you another example. Let's say the situation is that your wife always runs late, right? That's the situation. The problem is that when she runs late, it makes you feel really anxious and even embarrassed when you show up late to all of these events with your friends, right? So the problem is that feeling of embarrassment and that anxiety that comes up when you're running late. That's the problem that you need to talk about. So the first step in resolving perpetual issues is to figure out what's the real problem. How does the situation make me feel? The second step in resolving perpetual issues is understanding your pattern. What's the pattern that happens around these problems? Let me give you an example. Let's go back to the problem of not feeling supported by your partner because the housework's not getting done. Here's an example of a pattern. So let's say I don't feel supported by my partner. And because I don't feel supported, I don't trust that my partner's going to get things done. So I nag constantly. And the more that I nag, the less my partner does. So the more I nag. That's an example of a pattern. that can happen in a relationship around a perpetual problem. So let's explore a second example. Let's go back to that situation of lateness. And the problem is how anxious it makes me feel when I'm running late and how embarrassed I get when I don't show up on time. So around that problem, a pattern might be that I really try to avoid fighting with my spouse, so I never talk to them about my expectations about being late and arriving on time. We never talk about our expectations. She never knows when we're supposed to leave the house, so she is always running late. We show up late, I get embarrassed, I'm angry, I ice her out. So we're at a party and I don't talk to her all night long because I'm embarrassed and I'm angry. And that means when we get home, she's fuming, I'm upset, and we have a huge fight. And that means next time around, I'm even more anxious about fighting, so I don't bring it up again. That's a pattern. In all perpetual fighting, there's a pattern that makes the problem worse. So that's the second step in understanding how to stop fighting. Figure out your pattern. What's your pattern? The third step in solving perpetual problems is understanding your part. What's the role you play in making this pattern ongoing? So this is hard, and I will admit this is hard for me too, because understanding your role means accepting accountability and taking responsibility for something that you can change. Let's go back to those examples. So that first example, right, where the problem is feeling overwhelmed and unsupported, and the pattern is a pattern of nagging and resentment. In that situation, the role I might play, I might nag. And furthermore, I might criticize. So maybe my role in that is creating a culture of criticism, right? And building this situation where my partner feels like they can't talk to me about things. That might be my role in that pattern. Let's go back to that first example. In that first example, there's a pattern of criticism and resentment and withdrawal. In that situation, my role might be that I'm pretty critical. That could be the role that I play in perpetuating that pattern. Because the more critical I get, the more my husband's gonna withdraw. And the less he's actually gonna do around the house, because if nothing's good enough, what's the point, right? So that's my role in that example. Second example, where my wife is always late. In that pattern, my role is that I avoid conflict. And because I avoid conflict, I never talk to her about my expectations. And then when I'm upset, I ice her out. That's my role in that pattern. That third P is the most critical part in stopping these perpetual issues. Figure out your role. Once you understand the problem, the pattern, and your part in it, you can have a much deeper conversation with your partner about what's really going on. And when you can understand what's really going on, and when you can take responsibility for your part, then you can make a change. So again, if you want to stop fighting about the same thing over and over and over again, try my 3P approach. Problem, pattern, part. I hope you found this video helpful. If you found this video helpful, please share it with your partner. And next time you run into one of those perpetual issues, try this approach and see how it works.